Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex, for the lovely introduction. Thank you for inviting me to speak and organizing this event. Hello, everyone. I'm Tai-Chun from Taiwan. Thank you all for coming. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my slides? And can you hear me all right?
Yes, all good.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Since the publication of a group of barrack-room ballads after his return to England in 1889, Roger Kipling has been hailed as the first English poet to treat the life of the common soldier as a subject of poetry and to give voice to the long-neglected Tommy Atkins. In an 1892 review, Lionel Johnson foregrounds the originality of Kipling's barrack-room ballads, proclaiming that, I quote, "the British Army at large and the British soldier in particular have received so little attention in literature." According to Johnson, famous achievements and signal successes of armies or of regiments or of individual men have been sung, but the personal sentiments of the British soldier had not been the theme of any British poet worth naming. A decade later, in a 1902 article on war and poetry, speaking of the originality of Kipling's genius, the Edinburgh Review remarks that Kipling, I quote, has invented a style and discovered a subject matter. He suddenly brought down poetry from the high cliffs upon which it had been kept by the Tennysonian school to the familiar levels of street and barracks and ship decks. More recently, in his official biography of Kipling, first published in 1955, Charles Carrington writes, "Search English literature, and you will find no treatment of the English soldier on any adequate scale between Shakespeare and Kipling. He who wishes to know how British soldiers fight, how officers and men regard one another, how they talk the night before the battle, will seek the information in King Henry V or in barrack-room ballads, for it is to be found almost nowhere else in our English classics." I have quoted the opinions of Johnson, the Edinburgh Review, and Carrington to give a sense of the Kipling phenomenon in the late Victorian era, and to highlight the achievements of Kipling's war poetry, especially the new ground broken by his barrack-room ballads in the early 1890s. Yet at the same time, the commentary of the three critics, I think, raises question about the continuity of English war poetry and the relationship between the works of Kipling and those of his predecessors. Given that Lionel's and Carrington's criticism centers on Kipling's barrack-room ballads, and that the Edinburgh Review article appeared prior to the publication of Kipling's Five Nations, containing his service songs about the British soldiers fighting in South Africa, one might wonder how Kipling's experience of the Boer and the Great Wars reformulate his depiction of the British soldier. While Kipling's poetry covers various aspects of the life of the British soldier, this talk will concentrate on the theme of the soldier's return and trace the evolution of the returned soldier in Kipling's verse. This paper derives from a recent project that examines soldiers' return verse in the long 19th century. It's still a work in progress, so I will appreciate any feedback and suggestions. In what follows, I will first offer a brief account of soldiers' return verse from the Romantic to the mid-Victorian period, in order to consider the development of this particular type of war poem. I will then turn to Kipling's poetic engagement with the figure of the returned soldier from the three major conflicts, the Crimean, Boer, and the Great Wars. Of course, the soldier's return verse is not a distinctively 19th century thing. Rather, the homecoming of military men is both a real-life event that occurs during and after every military campaign, and the recurrent theme that inspired authors to compose works ranging from Homer's Odyssey to Rebecca Webb's World War I novel, The Return of the Soldier. Yet a close look at the large quantity of verse published during Britain's long-range conflicts with France from the late 18th century to the early 19th century shows that the soldier's return is a prevalent theme of Romantic war poetry. There are at least two recurrent narratives emerging from the soldier's return verse of the Romantic poets. The first depicts the psychological struggle of the returning soldier and dramatizes the reunion scene in which the soldier encounters his family or lover. I use the word returning because the soldier is literally traveling back home, and the focus of the narrative always centers on his encounter with his family or lover. By telling and retelling the story of the returning soldier's military experience and reunion, this narrative allows the poets to reimagine the figure of the returning soldier and to participate in a shared discourse, articulating their political engagement with the Romantic Wars. Take Robert Burns' The Soldier's Return, first published in 1793, for example. In this ballad, the happy reunion of a Scottish couple leads to the poem's conclusion, where the soldier's wealth is his honor, and the public should not despise the poor soldier, for he is the defendant of the country. However, Robert Mary's The Wounded Soldiers, published in 1795, so 2 years later, rewrites the narrative and makes the reunion scene a heartbreaking one. To caution, I quote, the poor who shed their blood for ministers of state. It tells the tale of a disabled soldier who relies on crutches to reach home. During the reunion scene, the horrid guise of the physical damaged soldier terrifies the mother, moves the father to tears, and kills the lover. The second recurrent narrative is concerned with the complex relationship between the returned soldier and the civilian community. It portrayed not so much a reunion, but a confrontation between the soldier and members of his community. In this narrative, the returned soldier is often an old beggar, a vagrant without home, one eliciting sympathetic or ambivalent responses from his encounters regarding the question of charity. This can be seen in Mary Robinson's The Old Soldier and Wordsworth's The Discharged Soldier, lamenting the toilsome life of a veteran soldier who will die unknown. Robinson's The Old Soldier first appeared in her 1799 novel, The Natural Daughter, without a title, before it was reprinted within the Morning Post as a stand-alone piece on the 31st of August, 1799. The poem in the novel was penned by the female protagonist, Martha, after encountering a land soldier. Chapter 4 of the novel describes a confrontation between this land soldier and Mr. Bradford, the invalid, and his two daughters, Martha and Julia. The coach now ascending a hill, and the land soldier addressed the travelers. He uncovered his right arm, which had been withered in the service of his country. Julia shuddered and closed her eyes. Martha threw a shilling into his hand, and Mr. Bradford exclaimed against the insolence of vagrants. In this scene, the land soldier is presented as a problematic figure who deliberately exposes his withered arm to the three travelers in order to provoke a response. Martha's sympathy and Mr. Bradford's contempt for the same land soldier quickly turned into a debate. I quote, "Of what use is a land soldier, say Mr. Bradford? Of infinite use, if only to remind the wealthy of their obligation, say Martha. Mr. Bradford believes that the land soldier is an impostor, yet Martha insists that his wound is not fictitious." Wordsworth's The Discharged Soldier offers a different treatment of the confrontation described in Robinson's novel. The first-person speaker is taking a solitary walk when he suddenly spots a menacing figure who is later revealed to be a soldier. who has been discharged from service but without accommodation for the evening. And yet, while the speaker is curious about his history and feels obligated to help him find lodging for the night, the tall, lank soldier responds to the speaker's question with reticence and accepts his help with indifference. With the outbreak of the Crimean War, one might expect a revival of soldiers' return verse. While the 2-year military conflict generated an outpouring of verse, it does not feature the theme of the soldiers' return, evinced by the Romantic poets. Britain's first modern war actually rerouted the trajectory of this verse. The birth of the war correspondent rendered the Romantic narrative of bringing the soldier home outdated. With the daily media coverage of the conflict, readers at home could simply turn to newspaper reports rather than poetry to learn of the condition of the British Army and its soldiers. It is only after the war was over that a new generation of Victorian poets began to respond to the trauma and to the dire condition of the veteran returning from the Crimea. In Coming Home, one of the dramatic monologues published in her noted 1870 verse volume entitled Portraits, Augusta Webster anatomized the complex feelings of a British soldier traveling by train to return home. As the soldier reflects upon the injury sustained in the Crimean battle that almost caused him to become, I quote, a spoiled and worthless wreck, the soldier speaker denounces the Victoria Cross he has won. You little dingy cross, less precious than my sleep links, what a worth lies in your worthlessness. This passage underlines the paradox of a military decoration a soldier has won through risking his life. Instituted by Queen Victoria on the 29th of January 1856, the Victoria Cross is the first medal to be awarded to individuals based on the merit of conspicuous bravery, regardless of rank or class, and the highest military decoration a British soldier can earn. Webster's speaker, however, dismissed it as a little dingy cross that does not serve any practical function. Kipling was well versed in the history and value of the Victoria Cross. As his 1897 article, Winning the Victoria Cross, discusses various models of heroism performed by its recipients. Selling the Cross, the first Kipling poem to be considered, is a commentary on the controversy of a collector attempting to buy the Victoria Crosses from the destitute Crimean veterans. Significantly, it is the first of Kipling's 1890 occasional poems that deal with the plight of the Crimean veteran soldier. The genesis of the poem underlines the crucial role newspapers play in Kipling's poetry. Kipling's response also shows how he draws on characters from his earlier works to participate in the media discussion of the problems faced by those veteran soldiers. St. James Gazette printed Selling the Cross with an introductory note, so on the left-hand side of the slide. The London newspapers, the East End News, exposed the humiliation Sergeant Alfred Ablett was subjected to when he received an insulting letter from a collector asking if he would be willing to sell his Victoria Cross and other medals. Given that the East End News disclosed this incident on 31st January 1890, and Kipling's poem was published 4 days later on the 3rd of February, one can assume that Kipling wrote it after reading the London article and sent it to the editor of St. James Gazette. Selling the Cross presents a conversation between the first-person speaker and Terence Vovani, an Irish private who appears in Kipling's soldier stories. At the beginning, the speaker carries the paper, shows Vovani the incident reported by the East End News, and asks him, I quote, "Is there any man that's crossed will sell his cross?" Here, the adjective cross can mean a soldier suffering in adversity or intoxicated, as Vovani believes that 4 men have sold their crosses under the influence of alcohol. Kipling plays with the connotation of the word cross to investigate the cause of the veteran selling the cross and to condemn the collector creature via Vovani's voice. I quote, "If I have what he wanted and he tried dog tricks on me, I will paste him up with crosses of sumptuous degree," says Vovani. He goes on to say that the collector should learn, I quote, "one piece of stained gunmetal means promiscuous pints of blood." Here, the first part of the line alludes to the belief that the Victoria Cross is made of the bronze of the Russian guns captured during the Crimean War. The second part, containing the imagery of blood, evokes the bloodshed of combat and the dangerous act of extreme bravery performed by the cross recipients. While the correspondent of the East End News already remarks that the Victoria Cross is not an object to be bartered for and sold, Kipling's newspaper poem exploits the religious association of the cross to suggest that it is sacrilegious to buy and sell an object as sacred as the Victoria Cross. Kipling's second 1890 poem that addresses the plight of the Crimean veteran soldier is his fundraising poem, The Last of the Light Brigade, first published in St. James Gazette on the 28th of April, 1890. Again, the newspaper plays a huge part in the genesis and reception of this poem. It is prefaced by a quotation from an article, The Fund for the Balaclava Veterans, which appeared in Pomo Gazette on the 25th of April, 1890. 24 pounds represented the response so far of the British public to the appeal made by the Committee for Funds to enable provision to be made for the declining days of those of the survivors of the Balaclava charge, who are known to have come to misery and want, and whose number now scarcely exceeds 20. In early 1890, the Balaclava Committee set up a fund and made an appeal to the British public for the surviving veterans of the Balaclava. Disappointingly, as the above quotation highlighted by Kipling shows, the fund only raised a meager amount of money. On May 17, 1890, the British popular magazine Answers, founded by Alfred Harmsworth in 1881, printed an article entitled Light Brigade Heroes Fund, a miserable total. We are very disappointed at the total of the first week's subscription in response to our appeal on behalf of the poor old heroes of the famous charge at Balaclava. We are the most surprised because whenever we have been present at a public recital of Tennyson's grand poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, the audience has been visibly moved. The bewilderment experienced by the Light Brigade Relief Committee offers a useful look at the effects of Tennyson's The Charge. During the Crimean War, Tennyson's war poem could serve multiple purposes, but given the plight of the veteran survivors of the Light Brigade, the only way to measure its worth when recited at the public charity event is the money raised, and Tennyson's The Charge manifestly failed in this task. While the laureate's The Charge may sing the ideal poem to be recited for fundraising purposes, there are at least two reasons why it's actually not a good choice. In the first place, the 1854 poem was written to commemorate not the survivors of the Light Brigade, but the noble 600, those who boldly rode into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, to face the firing of Russian cannons, which include those who did not return home. Second, the poem was never to make any connection with money, but to renounce financial gain. As a whole, Tennyson's Crimean War poetry is intensely anti-commercial. A distinguishing feature of Kipling's war poetry, on the other hand, is that it is deeply conscious of the vital role money plays in the difficult life of the British soldier. Kipling's The Last of the Light Brigade addressed not only the failure of the Light Brigade Fund, but also the inadequacy of Tennyson's famous poem in the 1890 context of fundraising. It challenges the heroic aesthetic reading of Tennyson's poem by expressing a request to the master singer to write another poem for the 20 broken troopers who lack a bed for the night, who had neither food nor money, for they had neither service nor trade. It imagines an old troop sergeant proposing to the remaining survivors the plant. Let's go to the man who writes the things on balaclava the kiddies at school recites. When they arrive at the residence of the poet laureate, the old troop sergeant, who acts as their spokesman, pleads. You wrote of the Light Brigade, sir, he's all that isn't dead. And it's all come true, what you wrote, sir, regarding the mouth of hell. For we are all of us nigh to the workhouse, and we thought we were call and tell. No, thank you, we don't want food, sir, but couldn't you take and write a sort of to be continued and see next page of the fight? We think that someone has blundered, and couldn't you tell them how? You wrote we were heroes once, sir, please write we are starving now. This begging scene shows how Kipling appropriates the famous words of Tennyson's The Charge, such as the mouth of hell and someone has blundered, to redirect the public's attention to the starvation faced by the survivors of the Light Brigade, and to raise the question of who is to blame for their dire condition. In response, the heart of the master singer grew hot with the scorn of scorn, and he wrote for them wondrous verses that swept the land like a flame, till the fattest souls of the English were scourged with a thing called shame. This imagined encounter between the survivors of the Light Brigade and the master singer is a fabrication. The 81-year-old poet laureate of 1890 did not write a sequel to The Charge of the Light Brigade. On one level, the young poet Kipling envisioned this pleading scene and Tennyson's resultant composition about the survivors of the Light Brigade as a tribute to the poet laureate. On another level, his own poem, The Last of the Light Brigade, contributes to the Light Brigade fund and reveals his ambition to compose wondrous verses that swept the land like a flame. The begging scene for poetry to address the condition of the returned soldier also affirms the place and power of poetry. The poem that fulfills the veteran survivor's expectations, but now ends at the service of the new generation of Tommy Atkins, is The Absent-Minded Beggar, the phenomenal poem that empties the pockets of the late Victorians at the start of the Boer War, with its notorious refrain, pay, pay, pay. As Alex mentioned, I wrote about Kipling's The Absent-Minded Beggar in a 2021 article. If you are interested in Kipling's fundraising verse, perhaps you might want to read it. Now I will move on to Kipling's engagement with the returned soldier of the Boer War. In a letter written to Charles Mobley Bell on the 3rd of March 1901, Kipling tells the editor of the Times, I'm at work on sort of long thing about the return of the troops and the lessons of the war, etc. in verse. The letter does not state explicitly which poem Kipling was working on, but it could refer to either Charm Pagan and All the Return, the first and final service songs in the Five Nations. During the Anglo-Boer War, British newspapers regularly reported on the British soldiers returning from South Africa and included poetry in its columns. In a 1901 version of The Soldier's Return, printed in an Irish newspaper, Skip Barron and West Carberry Eagle, the first-person soldier speaker relates how the news of, I quote, a bully lodged in my backbone killed his lover. Upon returning home, only to find her grave at the end of the poem, the soldier laments, oh, could I only live over the life I've wasted till now, I would choose not the role of a soldier, nor covet the wreath on his brow. Clearly, this newspaper poem used the romantic tradition of the soldier's return to denounce the campaign waged in South Africa and the soldier's profession. Another 1901 version of The Soldier's Return, printed in Cole's Hill Chronicle, celebrates the homecoming of the hero with the refrain, I quote, "For fate has spared the son we sent to the battles in Kruger's land." Unlike the Barrack Room Ballads, which first appear in newspapers, Kipling's Charm Pagan and The Return were first published in his 1903 volume of verse. The two poems show not only Kipling's departure from the Barrack Room Ballads, but also his engagement with the conventions of Soldier's Return verse. Kipling was not interested in, I think, the romance plot of the returning soldier in Romantic and Victorian poetry. Rather, he was attentive to the uneasy relationship between the discharged soldier, his civilian community, and South Africa in the aftermath of the Boer War. Both service songs articulate how a working-class British soldier's visions of the world are enlarged by his military career in South Africa, while exploring his struggle to reintegrate into the civilian community. So on the left-hand side of the slide, "How can I ever take on with awful old England again?" says the speaker of Charm Pagan. For him, there's something gone small with the lot in England. And on the right-hand side, "But now discharged, I fall away to do with the little things again," remarks the speaker at the end of The Return. And this suggests that his return to England is a kind of fall. Charm Pagan opens and ends with "me." The word is also the poem's refrain. Its opening, "Me that have been what I've been, me that have gone where I've gone, me that have seen what I've seen," recalls the conclusion of "Shilling a Day," the final Barrack Room ballad in the 1892 volume. Think what he's been, think what he's seen, think of his pension. And in this ballad, the old soldier, Old Kelly, who relies on his pension, a shilling a day, to eke out a living, relates how he's reduced to working as a hotel messenger to pay his bills. He ends his tale by expressing his desire to resume his job. I quote, "By the Grand Metropole, won't you give me a letter?" The passage cited above highlights his credential as a veteran soldier and the civilian sympathy for and possible intervention in his plight. Charm Pagan, however, privileged the returned soldier's own reflection upon his military experience. Like Old Kelly, the speaker of Charm Pagan ran errands. Yet unlike Old Kelly, the speaker is a single man rather than a married older soldier. At the end of stanza 3, the speaker narrates, "I'm taking some letters, almost as much as a mile to the post, and might you come back with a change." Here, for the squire, the change refers to the leftover money of the soldier's errand. But for the speaker, the change, which is immediately followed by the refrain of the poem "Me," emphasizes his consciousness of his change, a word that is also used in The Return. "I don't know where the change began." If addressing the plight of the old soldier is a predominant theme of the 1892 ballads, the 1903 poem reflects how the returned soldier's heightened consciousness of his war experience clashes with his new life in a rigid hierarchical civilian community in England. In Charm Pagan, this conflict is presented in Kipling's mingling of two perspectives: the speaker's preoccupation with his military experience and his dissatisfaction with the errands he has to run in his civilian life. The shifting of these two perspectives occur in stanza 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each of these stanzas begins with the recollection of his military experience, but suddenly reverts to the tasks he has to carry out in his civilian life. For example, in stanza 3, before narrating the duty of taking the letters to the post and the squire's reminder that he should come back with a change, the speaker is thinking about, I quote, "the size of the high, unexpressible skies." This sudden shift first occurs in stanza 2, while recollecting the boundless landscape he has seen in South Africa. He's interrupted by a voice. Importantly, the only italicized line in this poem, line 18, "Are you there? Are you there? Are you there?" is enclosed with quotation marks in the 1929 inclusive edition of Kipling's verse. The double emphasis, I think, is intended to distinguish the voice of the unknown character from that of the speaker. It probably suggests that the speaker is lost in reverie until the voice awakes him. Yet the next line, which brings out the blind drum fire of the battle scene, suggests that perhaps the speaker is still haunted by his combat experience. And it is not until the final line that the readers learn that the speaker is rolling the loans for the squire while recollecting his past military experience. In light of the tradition of soldiers' return verse, what is new in Chung Pagan is that the returned soldier is thinking about escaping the smallness of his civilian community. Rather remarkably, the final stanza of Chung Pagan expresses his longing to revisit South Africa. "I will arise again hence. I will track south and make sure, if it's only my fancy or not, that the sunshine of England is pale and the breeze of England are stale, and there's something gone small with the lot." In this passage, the pale, stale rhyme reinforces the soldier's point that he's still not acclimated to England's sunshine and breezes. But it also implies that he is ill. To describe the soldier's wish to search for his cure, Kipling not only changed the speaker's voice from "me" to "I," but also alludes to Yeats' The Lake Isle of Innisfree. "I will arise and go now," and the parable of the prodigal son in the Bible, "I will arise and go to my father." Ironically, this suggests that the speaker's homeland or fatherland, where he shall have some peace, lies not in England, but in South Africa. In exploring the possibility of settling down in South Africa, the speaker envisions a reunion with the Dutchman I fought and my maker. The reunion scene thus envisages a reconciliation in which he can befriend his one-time enemy, who might give me a job were I ever inclined, and a spiritual scene in which he will meet his maker. A major difference between Chung Pagan and The Return is that the speaker of the latter poem is from all arms rather than an irregular force. Commenting on his change, the speaker of The Return declares, "I did no more than others did. I don't know where the change began. I started as an average kid. I finished as a thinking man." The speaker claims in this passage that he's blossomed from an average kid to a thinking man. Crucially, Kipling presents this as an esoteric yet ordinary process, and does not claim that the boy soldier becomes a hero. During the Boer War, there were immensely popular music hall songs that celebrated the myth of the boy soldier, who becomes a patriotic hero due to his sacrifice for the nation. This was challenged by Hardy's elegy, Drummer Hodge, first published in 1899 under the title The Dead Drummer, and later collected in his 1901 volume, Poems of the Past and the Present. Singing of the death of a farm laborer who was not given a burial on the battlefield, Hardy lays bare young Hodge's innocence and ignorance of war. When he is dispatched to fight in South Africa, his uncoughing body ends up being consumed by the hostile foreign landscape he was meant to conquer. While Hardy depicts the strangeness of the constellation in the sky above the body of the unknown dead drummer, Kipling invokes the same eerie yet sublime landscape that enriches the military experience of the speaker. Rivers at night that cluck and jeer, plains which the moonshine turns to sea, mountains which never let you near, and stars to all eternity. Lines from 21 to 24 of The Return. Kipling's The Return can be read as a response to Hardy's elegy. It makes the case that the Boer War matures the British soldier, and teaches him things, even while it is difficult to explain how the change takes place. If a soldier's maturity can only be acquired through physical experience of war, the speaker's comment that he has done no more than others suggests that this is a universal theme. The change happens to not just him, but all boy soldiers. Kipling's experience of the First World War, however, altered his opinion of the return. When William Max Akin was about to publish the first volume of Canada in Flanders, which presents an official patriotic account of the Canadian Expeditionary Force involvement in World War I, he used the passage of Kipling's The Return, cited above, as an epigram for chapter 2 of the book entitled Warfare, and sent the poet the proofs. In a letter of the 6th of December 1915, Kipling wrote to Akin, I suggest that since it is a book of national and imperial interest, you quote from the older poets as much as may be, Shakespeare and Milton for choice. That's why I think you had better cut out the quotation from me. It's all right in a newspaper article, but it's too crude for such a book as this. As you can see, despite Kipling's suggestion, Akin kept the quotation from The Return. Yet what makes Kipling feel that the quotation about the change of average kid is now too crude to be included in a book of national and imperial interest? The most immediate incident that caused the poet to change his idea about the figure of the boy soldier was his personal grief, the loss of his only son, John Kipling, who was reported to have been wounded and missing during the Battle of Loos on the 27th of September 1915. In his letter written on the 14th of October 1915, searching for his son, Kipling and his wife Caroline harbored the hope that, I quote, our boy may be a wounded prisoner in some hospital, or if he was slightly wounded, may by now be better and in some prisoner camp. However, by the 12th of November 1915, Kipling seems to have accepted the fate of his son. All we can pick up from the man points to the fact that he is dead and probably wiped out by shell fire. In the sent letter, based on the information gathered, Kipling provides an account of how his son led the right platoon over a mile of open ground in face of shell and machine gun fire, and was dropped at the further limit of the advance after having emptied his pistol into a house full of German machine guns. Kipling comments, it was a short life. I'm sorry that all the year's work ended in that one afternoon, but lots of people are in our position, and it's something to have bred a man. Kipling's profound grief at losing his boy soldier and his acute awareness of the same tragedy in other British households led him to explore a new topic in Soldier's Return verse, the loss of the boy soldier and sailor. This can be seen in the two poems published after the death of John Kipling, My Boy Jack and the Children. I would like to end this talk by looking at the imagery of the bodily suffering in The Children, first published in Kipling's 1917 volume, A Diversity of Creatures. It is a poignant poem that underlines the importance of the bodies of those who did not return. I quote, their bodies were all our defense when we wrote our defenses. It is also an agonizing poem in the sense that the speaker obsessively lingers on the prolonged physical pain of the boy soldier. They believe us and perish for it. Our statecraft, our learning, deliver them bound to the pit and allied to the burning, whither they mirthfully hasten as jostling for honor. Not since her birth has our earth seen such worth loose upon her. That flesh we have nursed from the first in all cleanness was given to corruption. unveiled and assailed by the malice of heaven, by the heart-shaking jests of decay were it low on the wires, to be blenched or gay panted by fumes, to be cindered by fires, to be senselessly tossed and retossed in stale mutilation, from crater to crater. In this passage, Kipling stresses the passive bodies of the boy soldiers. It is our statecraft, our learning, that deliver them bound to the pit. Kipling used the phrase "to be" 3 times to underscore how the bodies are brutally mistreated. The fire imagery of this passage, the burning and to be cindered by fires, recalls Kipling's description of John's death and his remark that his son is probably wiped out by shell fire. The pit and the crater bring to mind dugouts in trenches or the image of hell. I think they also allude to the dreadful hollow in the famous opening line of Tennyson's Maud, wherein the unconsoled speaker laments the brutal murder of his father and imagines the violent mutilation of his father's body, discovered in the hollow dripping with blood. I quote, mangled and flattened and crushed and dinted into the ground. In Kipling's case, it's a father who cannot find the body of his soldier boy and imagine the mutilation of his body. Kipling remarks in a letter of the 9th of October 1915, I don't regret anything except the uncertainty that drives the father to search for the body of his son and to imagine his body tragically reflects the ambiguity of Kipling's language. To be senselessly tossed and retossed in stale mutilation. Is it the shell fire that tossed and retossed the bodies of the boys? Or is it Kipling the father who senselessly persuaded the military authorities to send his son to face the shell fire in the pit of the trenches? Thank you.
Splendid. Thank you, Tai-Chun. Thank you so much for that fascinating talk. If you could want to stop share screening now, then everyone will be visible again, and then we can resume for our Q&A. I'll stop the recording now.